Okay, so in this video, I'm going to talk about nested navigation with the GoRouter. In the previous video, we looked at the most basic implementation of the GoRouter without a nested navigation. And here we're going to look at nested navigation. Let's just quickly run through the contents of this video. We'll start with the wireframe of a simple app with nested navigation, so to show what we're talking about. Then we'll talk about the ShellRoute object that enables us to do that and how it's injected into the GoRouter. And we'll do a code implementation starting from the previously built simple GoRouter implementation. And one of the key elements is the scaffold with BottomNavigationBar, which also has the functions that allow us to switch indices and therefore switch routes. And then we'll look at the implementation of the GoRouter with the ShellRoute object, then compile into iOS and into the web, and do a recap. So what are we talking about when we use the word nested navigation? In our previous example, we had our home page and a login page, which were both at the same level. So now let's assume from the home page, I go into this page with users. But once I get to this user page, I'm basically living in a new navigator. So I can switch using this bottom navigation bar. I can switch between users and profile. And here, let's say I'm on the profile page, I can go one level up. For example, I can go to profile detail by clicking on a button that takes me there. The thing is, normally this page would also get the bottom navigation bar because this is like a new navigator. So this is a shell navigator. And this shell navigator would get the bottom navigation bar, but there's a mechanism for us to force to imitate as if it's using the root navigator. So therefore, the profile detail page does not show the users and profiles bottom navigation bar, and it shows it blank. However, the back button, again, will take us to the profile page because the back button knows that it's living in the shell navigator and it's one level of stack in the shell navigator, and it will fall back to profile page. And from the profile and user pages, there is no way to fall back down because they are at the base level of their navigator, or what they think is their navigator. So to go to the home route, we'll have to do something else. So let's look at also what this bottom navigation bar has to do. It has to have an on-tap property, which can be tied to context.go names based on which button is pressed. So if button 1 is pressed, go to users, button 2 is pressed, go to profile. And similarly, it should read from the current state of the router what's the current path, and from current path it should just determine which button should be showing as pressed. So let's understand the structure of the nested navigation from a widget point of view. So this GoRouter widget is our router config basically, and it has a bunch of functions that deals with redirect, errors, exception handling, and refresh listener, which we'll come to later. But then it has to have some routes. And in our previous example, in the previous page, it has the routes of home and login. But if we look at it from this perspective, underneath here, what's sitting is still the home page. So these routes with users, profile, and the profile detail basically two stacks here. They're all children of this home route. Okay, so let's go back to this router page. So the home route has a child, which is a ShellRoute. Okay, now this ShellRoute will again have its routes. So it has a user route and it has a profile route. Okay, so these are the lowest level routes from the ShellRoute perspective. In order to show the bottoms, it also takes a bottom object. So in this case, we're sending a scaffold with a bottom navigation bar. And in order to distinguish the two navigators, we basically take a reference to both navigators. So the first one, basically what the home page and the login page sit, that has a navigator key. We call this the root navigator, and we can have a reference to the root navigator key. But the ShellRoute is a second navigator that gets spawned on top of the home page, and this second navigator has its own key. Okay, and for the detail page, by assigning parent navigator as the root navigator, what we're doing is we're avoiding a bottom navigation bar to be displayed. So just to quickly recap here, the GoRouter has routes. In this case, it has two routes at the same level, home and login. The home route, instead of having direct children routes, which would be in the same navigator, it has a ShellRoute, which implies that a new navigator is spawned. And in this new navigator, we also inject a bottom navigation bar by defining the route mechanism. So we said that the profile page as well as the users page should be two pages that sit above the home page via ShellRoute. So what we can do is, for the home page, we define subroutes by filling its routes property. Okay, and its routes property gets a ShellRoute, okay, which also needs routes. And let's see what else it needs. We will not. So it needs a builder. It needs routes, and it can need the navigator keys. So we'll come to the navigator keys later, but basically for the routes, one of them should be this profile. So I cut this profile from the same level as home, and I place it inside the ShellRoute. Okay, and I also create a users route. Obviously, users is not defined, so therefore we need to go to route name and say save. So what have we done? We have now, if we save it, under the home page, we've created the routes, and routes now has a ShellRoute with profile and users. On top of it, we actually want another page on profile as a detail page. So let's show this. So as its children has a page called, let's call this profile detail. profile detail, and profile detail, and the destination could be home. Obviously we need to create the profile detail again over here. Just so we've created that name. So our structure is now home, and then after the home, the ShellRoute with profile and users at one level, one further level profile detail, and at the same level as home, login, and our previous routes forgot and sign up as from before. So this now concludes our router setup, except that we don't have a builder for the ShellRoute, right? So let's look at the ShellRoute and let's give it a builder. And it basically will build whatever object is coming into it in some form based on the context and the router state. So from the router state, we should be able to read the current path, and the child will be whatever is passed as to be built. So in the case of this, if profile is called, the child is going to be a generic page that's going to be built, sent to the ShellRoute as a child. So if the ShellRoute already contains a navigation bar at the bottom, it will be shown as the content of that scaffold. So therefore, what we can do is we can say that this ShellRoute will be populated as such that we will call it a ScaffoldWithNavBar over here. So we return a ScaffoldWithNavBar, and its child should be the child that's passed on here. And this obviously we haven't defined yet. So in the navigation, let me create another file, ScaffoldWithNavBar.dart, and a stateless widget, ScaffoldWithNavBar, import material, and here what we should return is a scaffold, and the body will be, so this will take a child, right? Final widget child, and it will return a so the body will be child, and it should have a bottom navigation bar widget. Okay, so we will put here a bottom navigation bar, and that widget is going to be the generic bottom navigation bar, and the items will be bottom navbar item. Icon should be, let's say, icons.person. Actually, it will be done like this. Person, and the title is, or in this case it was users, so let's do a list. And what other components we can give? A label, yeah, label is users. And what else do we need to give here? That's pretty much it. Okay. It probably needs a constant or something. Right. And this add final field parameters and add constant modifier. Okay. So that's for the users, that's for profile, and here we can go and put a person icon, and we now have our scaffold with a bottom navigation bar. Now what we can do is we can also initialize this with the current selected index of the navigation bar. So current index would be, let's say, will be 0, and it needs an on-tap property of, let's call it index, and we have to do something with index. Now the current index should not be 0. The current index should be based on what the route is. So let's call it calculate selected index based on the context. Okay, and we have to write this function. The on-tap should be also a function of on item tapped, let's say, of index and context. Okay, so we need to write these two functions here within this class. So one of them would be calculate index of context, and the other one will be on item tapped of index and context. So the calculate selected index will first of all find the location of where we are, and the way we access location is location is equal to GoRouter state of context, and get the GoRouter state of context dot URI dot path. Okay, so that's the current path that we're at. So if the location it starts with users, then we should return 0. If location starts with profile, then we should return 1, because that's the first index, that's the second index. Now in the same way, what happens when the item is tapped? Okay, it will and if for whatever other reason, it should just return 0, just to be safe. Now the on item tapped is basically what happens if the item 1 or the other one is tapped. So we can do a switch of index, and then if the users is tapped, then context dot go named route name dot users, and if in the other situation, case 1, context dot route name dot profile, and just for default, context dot go name. Right. So now we have defined our scaffold with navbar, we can go back to our router and we can now pull this in. So we have the scaffold with navbar. The only thing we haven't done is that we will end up getting in this profile detail, we will end up getting the bottom navigation bar. But before that, let's first run this and see how this works. So our application has built, and the home page shows a link to profile, and we are now in that nested navigator with profile and users. Obviously the profile is selected, and if I click on users, I get an error, and this error is basically saying that the has no GoName method. To circumvent this, we basically have to change these contexts to GoRouter of context. If we do that, this problem gets solved because we go all the way up to find the GoRouter of the context, and because that's where the named routes are defined. Okay, and let's refresh our application and have a look at profile. Profile works and users works as well. So going back to profile, we could go to login. Okay, so login has again the forgot password page, sign up page, and we could pop back to login, and from the sign up page we can go to home, and in the home page we can go to profile, which is the nested navigation now. Okay, so if we bring up our screen, so we go from home so let's refresh the app. From home I can go to this page, the profile page, and then I have a link to go back to login. I would go to this page, and this is the user page. Now the thing is, in the profile detail, we don't have a link to go to profile detail. So let's fix that. Let's go to the router definition. In the profile page, we have a route profile detail, but the destination is here placed as login. So the destination I want to have to profile detail. Now in the home page, I go to profile. In the profile, actually I need to refresh my app. Go to profile. Now in the profile page I have a link to profile detail, which when it spawns it still has the bottom navigator here, and if I click profile it will take me to the profile page, so it will drop down from the stack. Okay, if I say profile detail, I'm here, but also this will drop me down from the stack. But the thing is, when I click on this profile detail, I don't want the bottom navigation to show. And the way to do that is to define these navigator keys. So global key navigator state, route navigator, and global key shell navigator. Now for the GoRouter, I put a key as navigator key as root navigator. Okay, and for the ShellRoute, I put a navigator key as the shell navigator. Okay, the only thing is for the profile detail, I'll need to put the parent navigator key as the root navigator. Actually, let's rename this keys. So I have a root navigator key and shell navigator key. The root navigator key goes to the GoRouters navigator key, and the shell navigator goes to the navigator key of the shell navigator. The only thing is that detail page, this route with the detail page, I want to show it on the root navigator. So let's rerun our app. I'll go to the profile page, so I basically go to this page here. And when I click on profile detail, now I don't see the bottom navigation bar anymore. That's because we're using the navigator of the parent, meaning the root navigator, rather than the navigator of the shell navigator. Okay, so that's one way of not showing the bottom navigation bar in the detail pages. But the back button behavior works exactly the same way. Now let's just stop this and do the same for the Chrome. Remember, we already did the URL strategy, so the URL should come nice. Right. Okay, so now we have our app built with Google Chrome. Again, going to profile, I have the profile page. And if I want to go to profile detail, I have profile/profile detail page, and I can of course navigate just from the browser by going to the home page, or I can go to login/forgot, and it should take me to the forgot page with the back button working, or I could go to users page. And the users page has at the bottom the bottom navigation bar. And if I go to profile, I'll still have the navigation bar, but if I go to profile detail, the navigation bar is gone. So for the web version, we get exactly the same behavior. Just to see the web version in a smaller scale, more like a mobile phone, it has this kind of behavior. And that basically concludes our app. And if we want to quickly look at what we've done, we have injected a child route to the home route in the way of a shell route. Okay, and the shell route has certain child routes, and shell route becomes this nested navigation point. And in order to show these buttons, in its builder, we basically wrap its child with a scaffold with navigation bar. And the scaffold with navigation bar handles the item tapping and also displaying which index there is, and also it populates the navigation bar with the required indices and buttons. And that concludes our GoRouter with ShellRoute for nested navigation.